Good morning or good afternoon to all our participants here in person and also in virtual space. And I welcome you to an ESOF session on who is responsible for transferable skills and how can RRI and Open Science help. This is a session that came out of the New Horizon project that had a social lab for the Marie Skłodowski-Curie reactions. And the New Horizon project looks at how responsible research and innovation is integrated into all Horizon 2020 programs. And the one we were involved in was concerned with the Marie Skłodowski-Curie reactions. I would ask the organizers to start the slide. And here are my speakers. Online we have Ivo Grigorov of the Open Science Clinique and the Technical University of Denmark, our Danish Technical University. We have Katie Wheat, who's a policy engagement officer of Vitae in the UK. And we have Manuel Gomez Herrera, who is a policy officer at the Marie Skłodowski-Curie reactions of the European Commission. Here in person, we have my colleague from the Euroscience Governing Board, Teresa Fernandez Zafra, and Anna Slavic, who is the leader of the Open Science Working Group of Eurodoc. And here we have a slide showing exactly the same. This is a session that's concerned with how open science and responsible research and innovation are integrated into the training of doctoral candidates. That in the last years there has been a lot of attention paid to researcher career assessment, particularly within universities. This is a slide from Conor O'Carroll, who was involved in the development of this OSCAM matrix, the Open Science Career Assessment Matrix, and it basically condenses a lot of the elements that we would like to see considered in the assessment of researchers. And this session itself is not so concerned with career assessment, but it is very concerned with the elements of this career assessment matrix. So many of these have to do with research output, which is typically what's considered in career assessment, so publications and funding. We will talk more about open science, open access, open data, open source, but also elements such as research integrity, research ethics, and kind of the development of transferable skills within the careers of early career researchers. This shows just a summary of responsible research and innovation. It's a graphic that shows all of the 6 keys of RRI, that is kind of gender equality, engagement, public engagement, stakeholder engagement, governance, science education, ethics, and open access. So each one of these topics you could have many sessions at ESOF about. We will go into more detail about some than about others, but this is about RRI, which is a developing topic. This is an umbrella of many different topics, and it was introduced by the European Commission before Horizon 2020. In this way, we just want to inform the audience who may not know what they are, but we're more concerned with the underlying topics. And this is a graphic from Eurodoc, from Charlotte Weber, who's responsible for transferable skills within Eurodoc. And I just really like this graphic because it's a lot of topics, but it shows many of the skills that early career researchers develop within their PhD programs. With that, I would like to introduce my first speaker, who will talk about the development of her career, her engagement during her PhD, and her consequent career development. So please, Teresa.
Thank you, Ryan. I'm gonna stand up to give my speech, but we need to follow some procedures first that have to do with the COVID pandemic. So I'll be with you in a couple of minutes while they're just exchanging the things on the microphone and so forth. So, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you once again to all of you that are here present today and those of you that are following the session virtually. Thank you, Brian, for your kind introduction. So, if we can take the next slide, you will see what I'm presenting here is actually the first page of my PhD thesis. And this African proverb actually reflects really well how I felt during my PhD studies. I felt like a lost sailor in the open sea, aimless and adrift. But what I realized was that once I finally reached land, I had actually gained a lot of skills throughout my journey. So that's why I chose this proverb as a first page of my thesis, because I believe that smooth seas do not make skillful sailors. We can take the next slide. So here I have summarized most of the skills that I have gained throughout my PhD and that have been crucial for taking my next steps in my career. So at the moment, I work in a biotech company where I am working at the interface between research and development and marketing, so implementing new diagnostics into the market. And for the role that I'm carrying out, the skills that I developed throughout my PhD were crucial. These are the skills that are shown on the slide in blue with the header PhD studies. And of course, these skills, they also entail the deep knowledge that one gains on a specific field of research throughout the time. I have also highlighted there some of the skills that if you're doing a PhD or you already have one, you'll be familiar with, like planning and conducting research, or analyzing data, or having some critical thinking when you come to review papers, or also writing publications and so forth. So these hard skills are really the basis of what makes us unique and is what gives us our value. I also took the opportunity during my PhD to get involved in other activities. So I decided to take up the role of editor-in-chief in the Student Union magazine, and I also was involved in a brain festival where I took the position of project manager, and I was coordinating the science fair. Now, these two activities, they're very different in nature, but the skills that they provided me were actually fairly similar. And I think these soft skills are also important to the work that I'm carrying out today, especially when it comes to project management and team management, and also making sure that you have to stick to deadlines and stick to budgets and so on. So some of the activities I was doing in these two roles went from, for example, securing funding, preparing budgets, making sure that I could find a good team of volunteers that could help me out, preparing a magazine or taking part in the science fair, and also making sure that we were covering different topics and themes that were not overlapping. Another important aspect for me was also giving these volunteers some skills that they could gain. So this transfer of skills is also important for the people that are part of the team. Another thing that I would like to highlight is the importance of language. If you live in a country that is not your own and that operates in a different language, it's extremely important that you learn it, especially if you want to stay there. Not only will it help you to integrate better in society, but if you find a job later on, or even if you stay in academia, when you're gonna go on your future steps, you will need the language for the administrative things or for writing grants or just being able to interact with your colleagues. So I never found the time to focus on the language when I was doing my PhD because I was involved in many other activities. So I decided to take the time to learn it once I finished my PhD while I was looking for jobs. We can take the next slide. So basically, to sum up, these are the 5 main key points that I would like to share with you and are the lessons that I have learned. The first one is that your hard skills are going to be your core skills. This is the main thing that gives you your value. If you need to move forward in your career, be it academic or not, you will need to have a set of skills and a specific knowledge that will guide you there. I think it's also important that you know yourself and you understand your preferences. What I mean here is you need to nevertheless stay open and be flexible because life happens and things can change. You don't need to know your exact purpose in life and your exact direction, but it can really help you if you know your core values and you live up to them, because it will give you really a sense of fulfillment and happiness that you really need. So I really encourage you to look deep into yourself. Be proactive and get involved in activities that catch your attention. If you know, we learn by doing, so many times we may think that we know what we want to do, but we actually don't know until we really try it. So give it a shot and get involved in something that catches your attention. The next thing I want to point out is don't be afraid to fail. Try to turn your challenges into new opportunities. The more you fail, the more skills you will actually get, and you will understand better the process and how to get there if you want to succeed. You will understand what you did wrong and what you need to improve upon. And this will just result in more skills. And the last thing, which I have already mentioned, is that language and soft skills are also very important for employers. Hardcore skills will always come first, but these are also very important, especially the communication skills and the interpersonal skills. Thank you so much.
So, thanks very much, Teresa, for sharing your experience with us and the experience of an early career researcher, particularly one who moved into the private sector. As the next speaker, I would like to ask Katie Wheat from Vitae to speak, and she will be with you in a few seconds. Hello, Katie.
Hello, thank you, Brian.
So Katie has contributed to the Concordat, which is the main document that describes the conditions of researchers in the UK. And she has also recently run a survey about research integrity in the UK, which she will talk about now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Brian. Can you see my slides? Oh, yes, great. Okay, so thank you very much for that introduction, and pleasure to virtually join you in Trieste. What I would like to do is draw in just a few findings from a study of research integrity, the research integrity landscape in the UK. And this study was carried out by Vitae together with colleagues from the UK Research Integrity Office and the UK Reproducibility Network. And it's a study that was commissioned by UK Research and Innovation. So first of all, the study attempted to describe the landscape of influences on research integrity behavior of individual researchers. But what you can see on this slide, which is, I must say, a very simplified depiction, is that there is a complicated system of influences and interactions on the behavior of those individuals. So if you think of individuals sitting inside these spheres, they're surrounded by their local culture, they have interactions with their different disciplines, their institution, there are national policies and frameworks, such as the Researcher Development Concordat in the UK that you mentioned, Brian. And this sits within a global research ecosystem. And so this is just one thing that I will come back to later, just to start off this idea of the complexity of the system that we're talking about. So through the study, we conducted a large-scale survey of researchers, and one of the things that we asked them is, what is the impact on research integrity of a range of potential incentives? And by incentives, we mean things that shape the researcher's behaviour for better or for worse. And what you can see in that left-hand column, so the green column, are a range of influences that researchers described as positive, so having a good impact on their research integrity. And things like data sharing policies, so policies around open data, open access and interdisciplinarity were just a few of the influences that they found to be positive, and also their professional development and training opportunities, so very much aspects which are hooking into the conversation that we're having today, are things that impact positively on the quality of that research, on things like the rigor and the openness and the trustworthiness of that research. If we look then to the right-hand column, so the red column, what we can see are things that were perceived by researchers to have a potential negative impact on research integrity. So again, a negative impact on things like the rigor and trustworthiness of that research. And a couple of things I'll draw your attention to there are researcher assessment, so how researchers are assessed for promotion in their careers was perceived to have a potentially negative impact, and also things like league tables of institutions and those proxy measures that we have for research assessment, such as the journal impact factor and H-index. And then again, just describing what a complicated landscape this is, we've got a range of things falling in the middle, which were seen to have both a positive and a negative impact. So things like the public perception of research, so again, very much hooking into responsible research and innovation, but was perceived to have potentially both positive and negative impacts. And there was quite a large qualitative component to the study as well. And some of the themes coming out there were, for example, media reporting of research is not always accurate for different reasons, and also the public understanding of research, therefore, does not always match the true findings of the research. So quite a complicated picture there. And there are a number of other factors there, and researcher assessment coming up there again is something that has the potential to be positive or the potential to be negative. And underlying that is very much a sense of it can be applied in positive ways and it can be applied in ways that are inappropriate. So in the context of research integrity, if those assessment factors relate to research integrity, that would have a positive impact. And if those research assessment measures are not related to research integrity, so for example, contribute to a pressure to publish, so a quantity over quality outlook, then that might have the potential to undermine the integrity of that research. And so the third big finding that I'd like to share is that researchers told us through the study that they feel highly personally responsible for the integrity of their research. And I think that that's right. It's true that they are personally responsible. But what I think can be lost there is, and I think is important to recognise, is that it's also a collective responsibility. And there are a range of other actions that came out of the study that other stakeholder groups can and should be taking in order to support research integrity. So at that global level, the very recognition of collective responsibility. At a national level, embedding a culture of continuous improvement. So in the context of research integrity, ensuring, for example, that institutions are enabled and not penalised for raising research integrity issues, that there are not disincentives such as league tables or an approach to retractions and things as being scandals. Actually, these things should be framed positively in a way of correcting and ensuring the integrity of the research record. At the institutional level, of course, it's important to raise awareness, embed and act on the appropriate policies that support research integrity, but of course that support all of the things we're talking about today, so responsible research and openness as issues key, which are linked, of course, to research integrity. At the discipline level, that interdisciplinarity and learning from other disciplines and other approaches was something seen as highly positive, and I think links very well into the skills space as well. Certainly from different disciplines, there will be different core skills as Teresa described them, and learning and having that conversation across disciplines can be extremely positive. At the local level, embedding a culture of continuous improvement and continuous professional development. So that means needing to recognise, reward and importantly give time for engaging in professional development and engaging with the different policies and expectations of researchers. And this is something that very strongly comes through the Researcher Development Concordat in the UK. And I'll just say briefly, if that's a document that you're not yet aware of, it's the UK's equivalent of the European Charter and Code, and it was refreshed at the end of 2019, so at the end of last year, and very much takes a multi-stakeholder approach to what can be seen as an individual level problem, which is the need for researchers to build up their own skills and development in order to be widely employable, both in an academic context and in wider contexts. And so at the individual level, of course, it's important to acknowledge that it is a personal responsibility for individuals to take care of their career, but and therefore they must take up a broad range of opportunities to learn and improve, which is part of the role of being a researcher and being an academic and being a knowledge-based professional. So it should sit keenly within the day job and not be seen as something which is extra to do. And so just finally, I'd like to raise some comments and questions that I have in mind. And I think it's really important when we're talking about this to consider the relationship between the assessment of the research and the assessment of the researcher. And sometimes in this conversation, I feel that we can conflate these. For example, when we start to use proxies for research assessment or researcher assessment, such as the H-index and journal impact factors. So we should be clear when we're thinking about researcher career progression, what is important for that career progression? Are we talking about a range of competencies and a highly skilled and knowledgeable professional? Or are we talking about their track record of successful research, and what is our appropriate definition for successful research? Is it rigor and openness versus, for example, being published in a high impact journal? And secondly, we can see preparedness for conducting research that is responsible, open, and has integrity as one thing. And I've described that there's a clear collective responsibility for research being conducted with integrity. And what I'd like to argue is that there's also a collective responsibility, so this is equally true, for career preparedness. So individuals do have to take responsibility for this, and the culture must enable them to do so. And again, that's strongly conveyed through the Researcher Development Concordat. And finally, if we all took this responsibility for changing research culture, and I think the Research Integrity Landscape report very much highlights that integrity is fundamentally linked to research culture. If we took that responsibility through our actions, both large and small, what would that look like? What are the improvements that we could collectively make? Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Katie. That was very, very highly interesting and kind of encapsulated many of the topics we want to raise in this session. I would now like to ask Anna Slavec to talk, and she's here in person. And Anna is the Open Science Working Group Chair from Eurodoc. And she will talk about her work in research data management at InnoRenew in Slovenia.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Brian, thank you for the introduction. And Teresa and Katie, thank you for your presentations. So my name is Anna Slavec, and I'm here speaking for Eurodoc, the European Council of Doctoral Candidates and other early career researchers, where I'm one of the coordinators of the Open Science Working Group. I'm also a researcher myself. Actually, my career after the PhD, I did my PhD in statistics, so it's a field where you gain a lot of data science skills, which is very useful if you want to practice open science. But after my PhD, I didn't continue my career as a researcher in academia. I left my job there because I wanted to try something different. I was not really sure if I like my research area and I needed a break. So I accepted a job at the data archive, which is also part of a university, but I was not doing research myself. I was helping other researchers to manage their data, to prepare their data for the position in a data archive. And doing that job, but also previously as a researcher, these skills related to data. My next job, now it's already 3 years ago, I started the small independent research institute in Slovenia called InnoRenew Center of Excellence. It's a very interdisciplinary research institute, and I have a similar role to the one that I had at the data archive. I just changed the field, so previously I was working with researchers in social science, and now something completely different. I'm working with researchers in natural sciences, mostly engineers. So the field changed, the research field changed, but the skills I got, these transferable skills, are still very useful also changing this path. And also other researchers I know who during their PhDs learned who were practicing open science and learning data management skills, it's something that's very beneficial in their career. The point I want to make today is very similar to the one I made at the session where I also represented Eurodoc 2 years ago in Toulouse. And at that time, I presented 4 points related to open science implementation, and I think that's very relevant also for the session today. So in 2017, there was a survey done by a working group by the European Commission on open science skills, and what it found out was that most of the researchers are not even aware of that these skills are important. They are not aware of the available training, so the awareness is very low. So first, we need to do something to make doctoral students aware of the opportunities they have to learn these skills. And second, they need support. So there are already existing trainings, and we should motivate more researchers to join them, to be aware of the changing research landscape, and to take part in these trainings. But we also need more trainings, because most of the trainings that exist are very general, and you just get a very basic level of understanding, but there should be also more detailed courses, more hand-on experience to prepare researchers to get these skills, because these skills are valuable both for them as researchers and also as transferable skills which are useful later on in their career. The third point is that in institutions, so research institutes, universities, should provide support to researchers, because the researchers, they should learn these skills, but on the other hand, it takes time from the research they're doing, so there should be also support roles for them at the institution. For example, in the later years, the profession of data steward is something that in universities in some countries have been introducing, but this is now just rare examples. It's more an exception rather than the rule. But in future, because there will be more need for these kind of skills, the universities, or institutions should invest in more supportive roles. But the data steward is not somebody who does the work instead of the researcher. They just work together. So working with the data steward also, the researcher learns more about how to manage their data. And the fourth point is, as was previously mentioned, related to open science. Research assessment is very important. So the researchers are not aware that this is going to change, but how it's going to change, it's in their advantage. It's in their advantage if they're practicing open science, what they're doing, it takes a lot of time. And so not only papers should be valued as a contribution, but also the previous work, the data that you collect, the code that you write. So everything that you do as a researcher, a lot of these activities now don't have any value when you're evaluated. And this is something that in future might change, but the researchers are not prepared for that. So another reason why the awareness should be raised is also to prepare the researchers for this change. And now to answer the question, which is in the title of this session, who is responsible for transferable skills? I think it's a shared responsibility of the researcher and the institution, because both have this responsibility to make science better, but it's also something beneficial to both of them, because by practicing open science, the researcher gets transferable skills that make him more employable inside academia, but in maybe different careers inside of academia, or maybe different research fields inside academia, and also outside of academia. There are a lot of researchers who, after the PhD, started a job like Teresa today presented her experience. So these skills are valued also outside. And of course, for the institution, it's beneficial that that the PhD students, that they finish the program at the university, they also get employment, and so also institutions should be responsible for these skills and invest in this area in the next years. And that's all from me. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Anna, for the very, very nice talk about your own experience. I would now like to ask Ivo Grigorov from the Danish Technical University to speak about his work in open science, in training, and in research management.
Great, thank you, Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Super. Thank you for the running session, and thank you to the previous speakers for really setting up the scene. If I just quickly cherry pick some of the take-home messages for me from the previous speakers that kind of set the scene for me, and I also see that being discussed on social media in association with this session, is that we saw the example of the graduate student and how she demonstrated value in some of these transferable skills rather than just collecting a bunch of courses to list on the CV. We also heard from Katie that transferable skills is and should be a shared responsibility, but the responsibility of each level is very different. And although we can never put aside the individual responsibility to be responsible for one's own career and skills, I think there are issues that we need to address in the rest of the ecosystem. And of course, we had Anna who reiterated this issue on awareness, both among the individual youngsters, the early career researchers, but as well as the institution. So all of those points kind of resonate strongly with me, and I would like to take 5 or 10 minutes to offer you my very narrow perspective on this big issue of transferable skills and who is responsible. Just to give you a bit of a background, by day I'm a grant support officer, so I would assist early career researchers to secure their grants. So if you're a Marie Curie fellow out there stressing over the looming deadline, good luck. And by spare time, I'm an open science enthusiast, and when time allows, an advocate. So my perspective is, I offer you a witness perspective from somebody outside the graduate school system looking in on how the output of the graduate schools, the early career researchers, face some of the challenges of setting up their career in academia. And what are the transferable skills there that they need to really get going. So that's a little bit of a narrow perspective, if you like. In my personal experience, lately, the last few years, the narrative on better research assessment criteria that Katie touched on has evolved much faster than most graduate schools are able to cope with and adapt their training philosophies and the training they deliver. And also the level of awareness, as also Anna mentioned, among senior researchers that supervise and that mentor and that really support the early career researchers, level of awareness is still very low. Academic officers who are responsible for the graduate school training programs, the awareness there is also patchy. To give you an example, it is not uncommon for me to come across a head of graduate school and in private conversation find out that they honestly believe that the whole narrative around open science and responsible research innovation and their relevance to a excellent career in research, all of that will just fizzle out, and somehow will never get traction. And we shouldn't really worry about that until it's really imposed on us. So that kind of complacency causes a problem. If we take the if you want to call it complacency or just innocent lack of awareness, it manifests itself in a very concerning way, and that is the output of the graduate schools. In the environment where I work, I see the early career researchers graduate, and one of the first places that the first doors they might knock on would be the equivalent of professionals like me. And they will have a bright research idea and maybe strong research background, and then they will need to match that with funding in the real world in order to set up a career. A constant tragedy of this day job, if you like, is how unprepared freshly graduated PhDs can be in terms of transferable skills that are required by funders, that are required by competitive calls in order to kickstart a career. Frequently, graduates believe that just publishing papers in Nature will get them through, and for those that can, maybe it does. But for the majority, they need to really rely on a diversity of tactics and strategies and skills in order to add value to their research ideas. Unfortunately, frequently, the impact literacy among the early career researchers is reduced to just performing against the impact factor, and that's not entirely their fault. Things like access to the results, independent validation, all the way down to the building blocks of their research, the reuse of those building blocks, and even the reproducibility and societal impact are not default considerations in designing their research for funding in future. And yet skills like this are now essential in a very competitive funding environment. Again, we're in Marie Curie fellowship season, and that is one good example of a highly competitive environment where simply knowing how to publish papers in high impact journals will not get you through, will not get you funded. You really have to be a more aware, rounded candidate and be aware of topics that the responsible research innovation blanket term covers, and you have to be aware of open science and how that adds value to all of the research ideas that you have and how you're going to communicate them to the broader world. So this discrepancy, it causes a friction that I observe between graduates and the graduate schools. On one hand, graduate schools have a mission statement, which is to prepare early career researchers for the near future. But there is a little bit of a mismatch if there is a lack of awareness of where transferable skills are contributing in the future, both in the individual's career or in their research assessment. Then there isn't an equivalency of training provided by the institution in order to assure that. But it's not all bad news. I'm just going to steal a statement from a speaker in this very conference. Jean-Claude Burgerman mentioned the other day that in 10 years' time, research will be real-time, collaborative, data-driven. And 2020, this year, will be seen as the tipping point in that direction. That's a multi-million euro statement. It's not just a hazy dream. There is a huge investment by the European Commission into that statement, and Jean-Claude Burgerman knows that. He's a long-term champion for these ideas. But if you close your eyes and you just transport yourself into the future, you will see that open science will become a basic science literacy skill. It will underpin reproducibility, which is already a tenet of research. 10 years from now, research assessment will have a more diverse set of indicators to reward and accredit the right behavior that underpins reproducibility and research integrity and responsible research and innovation. And I'm just going to push it a little further for those of you new to the topic. Guess what? In 10 years' time, obtaining tenure position will be based on a proven track record of open science, not just for yourself as an individual, but mentoring the next generation of researchers to integrate it in their research design and research practice, as well as science communication, societal engagement, and so on. So these are not just hazy dreams. All of these statements are happening in a graduate school near you somewhere. The innovators are showing how it's done. So in conclusion, I would like to call on the mass body of graduate schools to really meet the individual early career researcher halfway and become more proactive on the debate of transferable skills. And in the words of Teresa Zafra, I invite you all to try and fail, because you're going to come out better at the other end. And not only will that make the early career researchers more bulletproof for a future research assessment criteria, whatever that happens to be, but it will also leave a better legacy for our collective graduate schools. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Ivo. And I will now move on to the next speaker, who is Manuel Gomez Herrera, and he's a policy officer at the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions Unit of the European Commission. And he will talk about the integration of responsible research and innovation and open science in MSCA in Horizon 2020, and also what will happen in Horizon Europe.
I hope you can also, anytime I share my screen, my video stops. So I hope you can hear me and you can see me now. Good morning or good afternoon. Thanks, Brian, for this invitation to the European Commission and myself particularly. During the next few minutes, I will give you an overview about these aspects of the responsible research and innovation, open science, and transferable skills on Horizon Europe, Horizon 2020 a little bit, and Horizon Europe more and more, with a particular focus on the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, the MSCA, where is the unit that I work in DG Education and Culture. Here you see let's say, the understanding from the European Commission and the research and innovation funding programs of responsible research and innovation, no mystery, and the different elements of public engagement, open science, ethics, and so on and so forth. I want to spend a few seconds providing a particular overview, a summary of the number of Horizon 2020 projects flagged as taking part on research and innovation approach by program part. Here you can see, as probably highlighted also by Brian, how MSCA, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, have a really strong approach to RRI in many projects, many MSCA actions. But it's also, to be honest, we also need to take into account here, we are showing absolute values. If we spoke about percentage of projects, MSCA still has very good values, I mean, around the average of Horizon Europe. But there are particular parts like science, science with and for society that would be, in terms of percentage of projects, of course, naturally, the part representing many more projects working on RRI, research and innovation, responsible research and innovation aspects. Let me focus now a bit more on open science in currently Horizon 2020 and more in Horizon Europe. Many of the exercise, many of the initiatives from the Commission start with a pilot exercise. In this case, we speak about the FP7 Framework Program for Research and Innovation, where open access was a pilot to deposit the manuscripts and provide open access to publications, to scientific publications. There in Horizon 2020, starting 2014, open access became mandatory. In the beginning, there were some parts opting out from this mandate, but finally, at the end of the Horizon 2020 project, Horizon 2020 program, we have open access as a mandatory aspect, where all researchers should deposit and provide open access to their research results, their publication. And also open access to data is more and more coming from a pilot exercise, a default option. And for Horizon Europe, what will happen that open science, citizens engagement, responsible data management will be even more embedded throughout the whole Horizon Europe philosophy in different parts, in the evaluation of proposals, grant agreement, reporting, and so on and so forth. Probably you can see this better in this slide. I could spend maybe too long time explaining this slide, but I just can give you a few examples. For example, the legal base, which is the regulation, the framework program, starts with definitions about open science, open access. Then we have principles about citizen engagement, social sciences and humanity and gender aspects, and so on and so forth. Specific articles on open science, specific articles on ethics. So this is the legal base that was presented by the Commission in spring 2018 that you have been available on the internet since then. During the last 2 years and a half, there have been negotiations with the Council and with the European Parliament. They should finish soon to have a work program, hopefully by beginning of next year. But here I show you a summary of the different parts of Horizon Europe legal basis, let's say devoting text to responsible research and innovation or open science features. I also want to highlight, for example, the part 4 on widening and strengthening ERA, and particularly the part on reforming and enhancing the research and innovation system, where you could find plenty of provisions about responsible research and innovation. And for Horizon Europe, what we can expect in terms of open science is going beyond open access and also focusing on responsible data management, fair and open data, and connecting with the different elements of responsible research and innovation that I presented in my first slide. Also, the project should also take into account science communication, citizens science, citizens engagement, and so on. And this is the most important comment probably in this slide. This will be taken into account in the evaluation of proposals. That's it, in the award criteria. So the independent evaluators will evaluate how much the proposals are complying with these provisions on open science or responsible research and innovation, explaining the different parts of the work programs. Providing a few details, open access to peer-reviewed scientific publications. Now I pass to the work program. I have been explaining a bit the provisions in the legal basis, but now speaking about the work program. Likely changes that you can see in a few months in the work program would be, of course, mandatory deposit of the repository of the manuscripts, immediate open access, sufficient IPRs, an empowerment of the authors, of the researchers to retain IPR in the intellectual property rights. And also, of course, a very important approach, a very important focus on the sharing of data and providing the necessary information for others to validate the scientific results and the publications. Open data, I already mentioned the importance of open data, fair data in Horizon Europe proposal and in the future Horizon Europe work programs. There will be, an obligation to establish and update a data management plan, providing, the data in repository and providing access to others to validate the data, as I mentioned. Important the license to have this open access to data, and the persistent identifiers and metadata, fair data. So these are elements that probably you are familiar with, most of our audience, but will be more and more present in the Horizon Europe work program. And also important to spend a few seconds speaking about the open science, the European Open Science Cloud, this kind of ecosystem, which will be a federation of different infrastructures, existing infrastructures and emerging ones, to offer a trust, an open and distributed system for the community, for the scientific community to have access to the different data in an interoperable manner and during the whole research and data life cycle. So the important thing here is also to highlight what is the support, the political support to these aspects that we can expect. I would say the highest, because here you can see the declarations, the words from my Commissioner Gabriel for Research, Innovation, Education and Youth. During the hearing, let's say her exam in the European Parliament, she mentioned as very important aspect the open science, for researchers to share their results, share their data, and also opening the debate on how to encourage researchers who support, who are advocates of the open science. And even also very importantly, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, mentioning in an event, a recent event, the European Open Science Cloud, so the importance of having a place to store the data for others to validate and to consult the data. Let me spend the last couple minutes in the program, in the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, the program where I work in the European Commission. Just I'll transition a presentation slide. Today is not the day to explain the different actions of MSCA, but probably the main message for MSCA in Horizon Europe in the future is a message of continuation. You will be able to find practically very similar actions devoted to the training and career development and transferable skills also of doctoral candidates, of postdocs, exchange of researchers, co-fund. And let me spend a couple seconds highlighting how the European Night of Researchers will be framed in an action called MSCA and Citizens that probably gives a little idea of the importance of citizen engagement in the MSCA. Here you have, similarly to my previous slide for the entire Horizon Europe program, you have a slide focused on the legal basis, the research and the regulation, the framework program and the specific program of Horizon Europe in the particular case of MSCA in this kind of tag cloud or collection of building blocks. This is text that you can find on the internet, in the text available in the internet, where you can, see how MSCA gives much importance to RRI principles like citizen engagement or citizen science, open science, fair data, and of course, transferable skills for the researchers to be prepared to work in the labor market and also to tackle societal challenges. This is important at legal-based side or a legal-based level. And this is my last slide, also at work program level. Again, as in previous slides, I can show you likely text that you will see in a few months in our work program. And I go to the introduction. Maybe when researchers start to prepare an application, a proposal, they think, okay, I skip the introduction and I go to the scope and the challenges and the impacts of the topic. But it's always important to take into account the introduction, the philosophy, the reasoning of the actions. And for the particular case of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, you can see practically the first sentence already mentioned the combination of skills of the researchers to be able to be ready for the future needs of the labor market. And what is also important, that the MSCA, this is text from the current version of our text in the work program, the MSCA will endorse open science principles, responsible research and innovation, gender, ethical dimensions, fair data. So these elements that you can see here in the introduction, our community can expect that will be also present in the scope, in the description of the topics, in the expected impacts, and again, what is very important, in the award criteria, in the evaluation criteria for the evaluators to take into account during the evaluation of proposals. So this is my message, that responsible research and innovation, open science principles are really in the backbone of MSCA, of the Marie Skłodowska-Curie actions, and in general of the Horizon Europe program. And you can see also this, let's say, as a recommendation or an obligation for the different proposals. With this, I thank your attention. I also want to thank the help of my colleagues of DG Research and Innovation, who also provided me information about the topics on open science and responsible research and innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manuel, for the very nice description of what's going to come in Horizon Europe in this field. And I would like to thank all of the other speakers. We have half an hour left for discussions. And I think we already have a question that came in from Matthew from Eurodoc. And I will ask Teresa. It's about, if you were head of a doctoral school at a university, which courses, trainings would you implement, and which levels within the university and the institutional organization would you try to engage?
Well, I think, can you hear me? Yeah. I think the best thing would be to give PhD students the chance to choose between courses where they can develop their transferable skills. And by transferable, I mean skills, for example, such as leadership or team management. They're also going to be very important for people that are going to stay within academia and have their own groups. So, for example, having some courses that have a bit more to do with project management or leadership and so on could be useful. Of course, it could be also interesting for those PhD students that have a keen interest on science communication or public engagement to be able to engage on those. But I don't think this should be a requirement for the PhD students. I think this should be more seen as a possibility for them to engage and explore different fields that they may be interested in.
I see a hand up from Alexander Haskell from the European University Association Council on Doctoral Education.
This microphone is, yes. Yes, thank you very much, all of you, and hello from Trieste and from this beautiful conference here. My question is, when we speak about skills training, especially in the context of research ethics and integrity, there is already a lot here about how to train against falsification, dealing with data, plagiarism, and so on. But Manuel now also mentioned the ethical dimension, also as part, especially of RRI. And the question, which is maybe also a little bit philosophical, but to what degree can you also have this ethical dimension of research and dealing with goals and effects transferred into a specific skills training, and what would these skills be?
That sounds like a question for Manuel. About ethical dimension, because this is also, for me, is a new concept.
Yeah, I mean, there are different elements that I presented in the proposal of the Commission of the Horizon Europe, and it's true, ethics is mentioned several times. Let me remind that one of the guiding principles of the MSCA is the Charter and Code of Researchers, the Charter for Researchers and the Code for Recruitment of Researchers. So all the proposals should take into account, I mean, these principles that are covered by the Charter and Code. And regarding ethical, your question is what kind of skills can be provided in training? It will be research conduct. I mean, the conduct of a researcher during his or her practice and career that is at the highest standards according to the, I mean, to be, let's say, honest, or to provide, to behave responsibly and according to the highest ethical standards. So this was we would expect from a proposal for the MSCA or other parts of the Commission. At the end of the day, let me remember that all proposals in all parts of Horizon 2020 and in the future Horizon Europe pass through an ethical screening in some way or the other. So it's important to take into account the ethical aspects in the proposal as well, in all research and innovation projects.
We have another question from a number of questions from the floor.
I would like to respond to that, and I could also see that Teresa wanted to answer that. I'm a philosopher from education, and one of the most interesting ethical approaches that I came across with was virtue ethics. So this is the Aristotelian approach, where you try to find out your own values, and this is not just a rational approach or a consequential approach related to your behavior, but it is also related to reflecting on your life story, thinking about how your private life is related to your professional life, that what you want to achieve in your professional life is similar to what you want to do in your private life. And I think that is the future of young researchers who want to stay inside or outside academia, that they are somehow, that they can tell to their children and later also to their grandchildren that what they did in their professional life was also related to the values that they wanted to give on in their personal life. And for that, virtue ethics is a very good approach, the McIntyre approach, where you start from your life story, you reflect on it, you bring it in relation with a community. And this is not easy to put into lists that you can, oh, I did this and this and this and this. This is more like a, well, like I said, a narrative approach. And I think this kind of skills help us also to work interdisciplinary, to empathize more with other perspectives, also what citizens are doing and why they are doing that. So I would encourage people who have responsibility in this field to explore this kind of ethics. Thank you.
That chimes very closely with some of the comments on social media about avoiding tick box exercises. And it's something that Teresa wants to speak.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to add that both during my master's and my PhD, we had a course, a mandatory course on ethics. This was crucial. This was actually always at the beginning. Before you even touch a pipette or get into the lab, you would do exercises, you would pick some kind of topic that is a little bit controversial, stem cells or working with aborted fetuses, these kind of things. You would have to reason from the perspective of the researcher, but also from people that are outside of research, how to approach this. We would also take a look at different articles and see whether the research on those articles was good, was there some kind of misconduct on them. So I think that this kind of training is really important, and at least I'm very happy that my university provided us with this training.
Anna, please.
During my doctoral training, I didn't have this kind of experience with this kind of courses. But last year I attended here in Trieste. There was every year they had the data science school organized by CoData and Research Data Alliance. And last year, for the first time, they had also a pilot school for data stewards. But we had courses together with students from third world countries who attended this data science school. And what I really liked was that there was these courses in coding, but at the end of each course, they had an also ethics exercise. And I think that was very valuable and very important because when you do data analysis, there are always some ethical considerations. And I think it was very beneficial that the students, they learned that what they're doing, especially developing some algorithms, it has an impact on the world, and they reflected what they were doing from this ethical perspective.
So, thanks very much. Chloe Hill from the European Geosciences Union would like to talk.
Yeah, so thank you to all the speakers and to Brian for the presentations. They were really excellent. I think my question is probably more for Teresa and for Anna, because you talked a little bit about the transferable skills and also about your own experience. And I think it's something that a lot of postdocs, a lot of early career scientists do think about, what skills do I have? And I was wondering what your advice would be for those postdocs or early career scientists who might be thinking about changing careers, going outside of academia, that don't feel like they have those transferable skills. Maybe they've picked up a few of them in their PhD or in their postdoc or in their academic life, but where should they go? Where should they look to find these transferable skills? And when you went to get your transferable skills, was it a conscious choice? Did you realize at the time that you were getting these skills from outside of academia, or did you sort of realize that once you found your current career? So, also, if any other members of the panel want to answer that, please feel free.
Okay. Thank you for the question, very good question. So for me, I already had the skills, and then after the PhD I realized, oh, this is something useful, that's something important, I can teach also others about this. So how to find this kind of skills? So in many countries in Europe, there are national associations of doctoral students and early career researchers. And a lot of them are members of Eurodoc. And Eurodoc last year, we had this program for training open science ambassadors. And most of the countries participated. And so in each country, there is now at least one open science ambassador among early career among early career researchers. Ivo was actually part of the program, so he and Garrett O'Neill, they organized this training for Open Science ambassadors. And now the ambassadors in their country, they're trying to raise awareness of open science among early career researchers. So maybe you can look in your country and try to contact this ambassador who can help you and recommend courses that you can take in your country, or maybe now virtual courses online.
My advice would be to network. Get to know your friends, your colleagues. What are they doing now? And you know, the PhD is a very long process, and also the postdoc. So what happened in my case was that in the end, while I was still there, many of my former colleagues had already left and were doing other things. So I could meet them for a coffee or whatever and ask them, what are you doing? What skills did you learn? What did you need? I also feel that you need to know yourself. And I think that by listening to yourself and seeing what else is there that I can do if you want to make an impact, then follow that. And once you open your way and you find people that are thinking like you and so on, it's like a snowball effect. You will start to find these associations that Anna is mentioning. You will be exposed to people that are thinking like you. And so I think it is important to be proactive and try to look things, because there are so many opportunities there. And regarding whether what you mentioned, if I intendedly looked for these skills, no. I just wanted to help. I wanted to do something. And it was actually when I started working at my current job that I realized, wow, all these things that I have learned, they come in so handy. So don't worry too much about what skills you have or you don't have. Just enjoy your time.
So, thanks very much, Teresa and Chloe and Anna. I would like to ask a question of Katie, and it's slightly related to Brexit, because the UK has showed a lot of leadership within European research. And particularly if you compare kind of gender equality or equality, diversity and inclusion between the Concordat and the Charter and Code, that in the new Concordat, that this is implemented in a way that is much more inclusive than the Charter and Code, particularly with regard to LGBTQ issues, but also disability. And do you think that the Charter and Code could also be redeveloped in the same way as the Concordat, and is due a rehaul?
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, so the Charter and Code published in 2015, so 5 years old now, and the pace of change around all of these issues that you highlight, the way that we think and talk about gender and gender equality, the way that we talk now about LGBTQ plus issues and racial diversity, I think absolutely it would benefit from a relook and a refresh. What happened with the Research and Development Concordat was not necessarily that the whole thing was torn up and restarted, but that it's important to take through those core principles, think about what is the purpose of the document and what is it trying to achieve, and therefore is the document now best achieving that, and does the language of the document convey the way that we now think about things. So I think absolutely for both the Concordat and the Charter and Code, the aspirations, the things that we're trying to achieve are still the same, but the way that we think about those things may be evolving, and the documents should be living and flexible and evolve with that pace of change.
Thanks very much. I have a question, just a general question that's about kind of training, because I've noticed that especially during COVID, many early career researchers have turned to online training independently of their universities and taking responsibility for developing transferable skills. Maybe, I think maybe if I add, but particularly LinkedIn Learning or Coursera in the field of data. And maybe Anna has some experience of kind of how early career researchers are training themselves.
Yeah, so there is this, and last year there was this training program that I attended by Eurodoc. This year during COVID, it was very specific for me because I became a mother, so I didn't have much time to attend any trainings. But yes, online there are many trainings. For example, a very good one that we last year as ambassadors of Open Science ambassadors took was the Foster courses, which are very well prepared. But yes, also online there are many, many courses, but sometimes maybe it's easier to learn hands-on. A lot of people don't like the online courses, but prefer to have this experience. And I think it's especially valuable when you're learning data skills because maybe there is some problem you have and you need somebody to help, to have a look at your computer. It's something very difficult to do from distance because they're not seeing you're there in the room together working on a computer. It's much easier to find what is not working in your code than doing that online. So I think face-to-face courses are still valuable, so I hope there will be opportunity in the future to organize also this kind of courses, not only rely on those online.
And Teresa would like to respond to.
Yeah, I also took some online courses because I wanted to, both when I was doing my PhD, but even now at my current job. And actually, I agree with Anna that it's really important that you are able to incorporate the practical experience of those courses somewhere. So in my case, for example, when I was managing the magazine and I had a team that I had to somehow make it work, I decided to take a course by the University of Michigan, and it was teaching me some strategies how to lead the team. And then what I did was that I directly applied those strategies that I found could fit in my case and use them practically. Another example is a course that I took recently for organizing clinical trials on the University of Gothenburg. I took it online, but this course was excellent because it was matching people that were living in the same region so that you could work together to complete the assignments. What I really liked about that course was that they actually gave us a real clinical trial to manage. So I really feel that there are some really, really good courses out there online. But of course, if you can complement them with practical experience, that would be even better.
I also have a question for Ivo, and it's because he's been particularly engaged and with researchers all over Europe through the Eurodoc program, and it's about kind of that many researchers still don't know what open science is, and there's this within institutions there's sometimes a disconnect between the people who give transferable skills training and the people who give open science training. It's very much seen by the institutions as being open access, and they think library. And the libraries often have problems engaging researchers in the training that may be very good that they offer, but sometimes they get very few people to take up the training. Can you give your input on how to engage researchers in open science training?
It's definitely a bit of a hiatus, yes, between both the definition of, like you say, open science is reduced to just access to publications, but of course the publication is just the tip of the iceberg, and that tip is underpinned by a lot of work that carries a lot of value and is locked in our drawers, and it can be reused, but one has to know how to put it in the right formats. That takes time, maybe sometimes expertise. Libraries definitely don't have the capacity, both in time or in knowledge, know-how, how to tailor serve each discipline. So what we're seeing from the leading faculties and departments is that they commits to meet that challenge, and they will either create a post for open science coordinator, or if it's a data intensive discipline, they will have a data steward, like Anna mentioned earlier, which injects generic data skills, but serves this particular discipline in the right way. And I think that seems to be opening the door for many researchers who don't know how to deal with those issues, and they have an expert in-house to learn from and with. So that could be one tactic to bridge the lack of awareness.
Thanks very much, Ivo. I would now we've got 8.5 minutes left, so I would like to give each speaker a short amount of time to respond to a very general question that many of the constituent parts of open science and responsible research and innovation are in themselves very, very important parts of research culture. And how can we ensure that these topics really become the main part of our research culture and foster greater awareness and greater training of researchers? It particularly responds to what Katie presented in her second slide about and all of her slides were reflected on this topic very closely. But how can we ensure that the impact of RRI goes beyond just being part of EU-funded research? Which is a very important driver, but it must be part of our deeper research culture. So, Katie, please.
Thank you, Brian. First, may I say my Saturday error that, of course, the Charter and Code was published in 2005. Not quite enough coffee yet today. But to respond to your question, I think one of the things that we need to do to embed all of this and ensure that it forms a core part of our research culture, as you say, is rightly about awareness raising and about the responsibility of all of those stakeholders, individual researchers included. But I think what we perhaps need more awareness of or more attention to is that this is strategically important for institutions and should form part of what institutions themselves are assessed on, measured on, and valued for. Developing your workforce, your employees, your researchers is fundamentally important to the teaching and the research and the benefits to society that universities are for. This isn't an extra thing for universities to do. This is a core part of their purpose, and furthermore is a core part of important shared values such as achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that's how we bring it into the research culture. Is that it's about the shared endeavour and what research and knowledge production is for, and the people and the culture are at the heart of that.
Thanks very much. And maybe Anna would like to say, from the point of view of a coordinator of an open science working group that has done so much work engaging early career researchers on this topic.
So I think it's very important to engage early career researchers, but not only them. We also have to think that when you're doing a PhD, you're working with your advisor. And so they also need to be open to the idea of opening up science, because it's really difficult collaborating with others who are not familiar with this. So you cannot do this alone. It's a collaborative thing. So we should think of the environment as a whole. We shouldn't just rely on the new generation, early career researchers will change it. If we want to have this change come quickly, we need to, it's something that all researchers, also senior researchers, should be involved in this change. And for this to happen, I think it's very important, the point that Katie made, that it's all about research evaluation. So what we do, so the things that we are already doing, how they're evaluated. So we should the way the researchers are evaluated needs to change, so that all these things that we are doing will have some value and will count in the career progression.
Thanks very much. And maybe Ivo can give the institutional point of view.
I guess I'm going to steal Charlotte Weber, who designed the graphic on transferable skills you mentioned earlier. If she was here, she would say, why are we talking about PhDs alone? And if we really want to make change collectively, we should capture them early. Why aren't we training master students and bachelor students in these core essential philosophies and approaches and skills? If we capture them early, maybe we don't have to worry about, by the time they're PhDs, that they can't perform against these criteria.
Thanks very much. And now I will go to Teresa.
Yeah, I very much agree with what all the other panelists have said, but I also think that it's really important if we look at this from the other angle, from the institution up there, that they should implement these elements into the syllabus for PhD students or master students, so that it's actually there. So at least in my case, we had some kind of checklist. What are the different things you need to fulfill to be able to graduate? And I think that this needs to also change from above, a bit like Anna said. So, yeah.
And now I call on Manuel Gomez Herrera to give the point of view of the main funding instrument of early career researchers within the European Commission.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. So, yeah, I think it's a concept that has been in some way or the other said by the speakers today, that what we need sometimes is an institutional change. It's one of the concepts important from the point of view of responsible research and innovation, to see that what we are expecting from the early career researchers also needs the institution to provide those trainings, as also to change the mindset. So from my point of view of the Commission of the institutional side, the MSCA and other parts of Horizon Europe, what we can do is to let's say, to provide provisions in our legal tests, in our work programs, like, for example, expected impact, saying what we expect from the project. So finally, in a kind is not, in a carrot strategy, of course, not in a stick strategy, trying to find incentives to promote this institutional change in the research performance organizations. So we see more presence of these elements of responsible research and innovation. And this connects, of course, with the research assessment. And I cannot say much, but I think there is also debate, and hopefully in the future there is a more formal debate among the community, the research and innovation community, to see how to establish new ways of performing research assessment beyond the journal impact factor, beyond the number of citations, because I think there are many other good ways to evaluate, to assess the performance of researchers. And we will keep working on that from the Commission side.
Thanks very, very much, Manuel. I would like to thank all of our speakers today for their engagement during, but also in the months and year leading up to the session, which wasn't always very easy with COVID. I would also like to thank Anne Löber and Joshua Cohn from the University of Amsterdam, who organized the MSCA Social Lab as part of the New Horizon project, where this idea started with Ivo and our colleague Asun from Madrid. And also all of the other participants within the social lab who were extremely enthusiastic about responsible research and innovation. And it was very enjoyable, but it also contributed to our personal development. And I learned very, very many things within the social lab. So thanks very much to everybody involved. I would like to say thanks to the ESOF organizers this year and to our audience, both here in person and throughout the world virtually. So until 2 years in Leiden.
Thank you.